I have to offer a special caveat to my sermon this morning, which is that sometimes my mom likes to come and check in on me to make sure I'm not telling stories about my childhood in my sermons. Well, lucky for you all, I'm doing just that this morning, and my mom is here. So, my mom Lucy is in the back in the yellow sweater, so after service, you all can go and fact check this sermon with her. So when I was a kid, I got a purple fishing rod. It was one of the little kid ones where the reel was shaped like a little fish, and it was purple and yellow, and I loved it. And I was convinced that I was going to be the best little fisher in all of the land. And I learned how to put the little gummy worms on the little hooks, which were like the kid-safe ones, so they weren't quite as sharp. And I learned how to cast my rod, which was my favorite part, of course, and then reel it back in so that it wouldn't get tangled. And I was so excited to go to my aunt's house in South Carolina. She lived on the inlet waters. So I knew that I could go right out the front door, right down to the water, and I could go fishing. And I knew that I was going to be great at fishing. I just knew it. So we get there, I put my little gummy worm on my little line, I march myself out to the edge of the water, I cast my line into the water, and then I waited. What felt like a very long time for a 5-year-old to wait. And I learned that day that one of the tenets of fishing is excessive patience. Something that I did not have then, and frankly still to this day, don't have. But I learned at least that you have to wait a little bit if you want to catch a fish. So I waited. And then it happened. I felt the little tug on the end of my line, the adrenaline rush as I quickly reeled in the fish, the absolute joy followed by the crushing panic that I felt as the little fish's body emerged from the water, wiggling on the end of my line. I immediately burst into tears. I threw my rod on the ground, I ran into the house, and I never fished again. That was about 30 years ago. So when I got home, to my mom's credit, she helped me to repurpose my little fishing rod. She took my little purple fishing rod, she took the hook off of the end, and she tied a pine cone to the end of my fishing rod. We then marched out onto our back deck and cast the line into the backyard, and slowly started to reel it back in, ever so slowly. And out of the bushes came our 2 outdoor cats. They crouched, they wiggled, they pounced, and instead of catching fish, suddenly we were fishing for cats. Now, I was really good at fishing for cats, in part because it didn't hurt the cats, and I liked that part. So I became really good at fishing for cats in the backyard with a pine cone. This was a transformation of something. What became fishing for fish became fishing for cats. There was change that happened in the meaning for me. Similarly, in our story from today, Jesus takes a community trade, fishing, something that Simon, James, and John understood so incredibly well. And they understood fishing so well because in this era, your family trade was truly your family trade. So these young men who were fishing, their fathers had taught them to fish, and their fathers' fathers had taught them to fish. So not only did they understand fishing because it was their trade, they truly gave meaning to the family business. They understood that fishing took patience. They understood what it looked like to comb over their nets for places of weakness and for holes. They understood that you had to go out at night when the fish would have moved up to the surface and closer to the edge of the water where they could more easily be caught. These men knew how to work smart and they knew how to work hard. And then here comes Jesus at the end of their business day in the morning when these fishermen were cleaning up and they were preparing to go home. And Jesus says, let's go out again to fish. Not only let's go out again, but let's go into the deep water. Now, we have to understand that during the heat of the day, the deep water would have been the place that the fish would retreat to get away from the sun. If you go out into the deep water, not only do you have to cast your net deeper, meaning that you might lose your net, therefore losing a part of your livelihood, but you're less likely to catch fish because in the deep water, the fish can swim down. They can swim away. So the deeper water would have been the more dangerous water. Lose your net, fall into the water, topple your boat into the water. But it also would have been the less advantageous way to fish. This would not necessarily have been the way that generations of fishermen would have understood fishing. And Simon tells Jesus, and I like to imagine that Simon took a little bit of an exasperated tone with Jesus. We've been out all night. We didn't catch anything. The fishing wasn't good. And I imagine there's a little hint of, Jesus, this is not your work. Stay in your lane. Right? And in between the lines of the passage, we might read that Simon is trying really hard to tell Jesus that this is not the move for the day. But Simon had just seen Jesus heal his mother-in-law, just one chapter previous in the Gospel of Luke. And so perhaps in his head he thought, well, if you say so, we'll go. And they go. And as the story tells us, they catch more fish than they could possibly imagine. They catch so many fish that they had to wave to their colleagues on the shore who also would have been packing up for the day. Put your boats back in the water. Come and help us take all of these fish into shore. They were catching at the wrong time of day in the wrong kind of water where the fish were less likely to be, and yet they catch this mind-boggling amount of fish. So many fish that Simon is simply overwhelmed. Truly, imagine being Simon, seeing this absolutely unimaginable amount of fish that you would never, as a tradesman, catch. Imagine this being the story told around his dinner table after generations and generations. That one time I went fishing in the middle of the day, and I caught so many fish that we had to have more boats come out to get them. It sounds like a story that you would embellish for a table of friends. But Jesus tells Simon, James, and John in this action that this is his work. This is the work of transformation. Just like Simon understood the way of fishing and the way to fish, Jesus understands people and the law this way. Jesus is showing James, Simon, and John in a language that they can easily understand the methods of fishing. That sometimes to reach people, you have to go where you least expect, when you least expect it. Sometimes you have to venture out again, even when you feel like you've done everything that you can. And perhaps that's where you will find abundance and transformation. And so as we journey together through Lent, exploring some of these foundational stories of Jesus, I think that this is the perfect place for us to begin, casting our nets into the deep water. Because I think that we all know where the proverbial deep water is in our own lives. The places in our own spheres of influence where we see scarcity might in fact be exactly where Jesus sees abundance. I believe that this is our invitation. It is to look at our own lives through the lens of Jesus. Can we wade into the deep water and put our effort and our energy into casting our nets into the depths, trusting that the holy mystery will reveal itself to us? Maybe this means that this election year, we journey into the treacherous waters of conversation with those that we disagree with, finding the patience of the fishermen to try and find the common ground with someone whose beliefs are different than ours. Perhaps it's fishing into the deep waters of hurt relationship. Maybe it's adding effort where you're already tired and ready to give up. I don't have to go on. You all know where the deep water is in your own lives. And so this Lent, let's go into the deep water. And may we trust that Jesus meets us there. And may we be transformed by what we find. Amen.